Welcome to the Wodesman podcast, catching up with all things bushcraft, wild camping and the great outdoors.
So saws.
Yeah.
Oh, what a subject.
Yeah, this is one of those rabbit holes that we could just descend into and get all nerdy about, like tooth positions and pull versus push saws. And
Yeah. I think let's start at basic and just, there's so many different types of saws, isn't there?
yeah, I think this is one that we could get in hot water for, because there's a big sort of internet fight, isn't there? There's lots of bushcraft debates.
Yeah.
Like, don't batten.
Yeah.
Like,
axe. You know.
should be carry an axe.
Yeah. Should you just have a saw? Should you just have a knife? Should you have none of these things?
Yeah, and then there's the old, like, there's the console war between backhoe and silky, aren't there? There's
Yes.
the people who claim that there's no other saw to be carried than the backhoe, and others who claim that the silky is the master race and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And there's twos and fros to both, and pros and cons to both.
And that's it. And our podcast is not about bashing anyone. We use
No.
both silkies and backhoes.
Yeah.
We
I'm
use-
also using whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. We use all sorts of saws. I actually opted for a bow saw on this trip.
Yep. You've got the was it the Boreal?
Boreal 21.
Yeah.
And it's a brilliant saw. And like, for an extended trip, that's the one I would take.
Yeah, really cool. I love the design of that. It just flat packs so nicely, but it also means you can cut through some really sizable bits of wood with minimal effort.
Yeah, it's a beast, and the teeth on it are really vicious. They're really nice, and I actually liked it so much that I've bought a 15-inch saw blank,
Nice.
just the blade.
Yeah.
And me and my dad are actually working on a frame for it. So we're going to
Nice.
make a folding buck saw with walnut.
I
and
love that.
Make a sort of 15-inch, slightly shorter, more compact version of the Boreal. And yeah, it should be pretty awesome.
Well, what's really awesome about them as well is they're so safe to
Yeah.
use as well. Compared to something like a folding saw where you've got, you know, quite a large blade with quite aggressive teeth in close proximity to your hand, and it can quite easily skip out. You know, I know that can happen with the bow saw as well, but with good positioning, you can avoid that a bit easier. And you know, they say in the arborist world, more injuries happy with silk and more accidents happen with silky saws than they do with chainsaws.
Really?
Yeah, so
Oh, wow.
just much more common mistake, you know, just a big laceration in the hand with a silky on the pullback.
I guess it's
As it
quite
skips.
easy. It's quite easy as well to become a bit complacent with a
Yeah.
saw.
Yeah.
Not a chainsaw, because a chainsaw, you're aware that thing will take your leg off.
Yeah, well, that bit me today, didn't it? You know, really.
Yes. Yeah. We've both got little scratches on our hands today from our saws.
Yep.
Mine, I just grabbed the wrong bit of my saw when I picked it up.
Yep.
Because obviously I was using it, and I just ran my finger on the blade just really lightly, and it's not a bad cut at all.
No, still enough to warrant like caution, though, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it just reminds you that it's sharp and it should be treated like a knife or an axe or any other tool with a sharp edge.
Yeah.
But then you cut yours, didn't you, on your silky?
Yep. Yeah. So I've got the Gilkey. I've got the Silky Gomboy, which is a folding saw, really, really nice. But unfortunately, when I was using it earlier today, the mass of some timber shifted just on the final kind of few pull strokes, and it pinched the blade and snapped the first kind of 1.5 to 2 inches off the top of the blade, which left a really nice sharp kind of edge that when I then closed the saw, it basically, one of the teeth stuck in my finger, and obviously as I was closing it couldn't
Well, the teeth were sort of off.
yeah, hanging off
a bit, weren't
yeah,
they? And
so
not where they should have been.
no, so yeah, it was pretty bad, and that kind of brought up the discussion on the point, didn't it, really, about tempering of blades and whether you know, is the silky maybe too hard, does it not bend enough, and it leads to different questions, because you've had experience with the same, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll touch on this briefly at the start before we look at like safety around saws, how to use saws effectively,
Yeah.
things like that. But I've had a silky. I've got two. I use one of them all the time. It's my carving saw. Because it cuts really nicely, leaves a clean cut, and it's in my carving kit constantly.
Really precise cuts.
Really precise, and I love it. And I've got another one that I bought because I liked my carving one so much. I wanted one for the woods because it cuts so quick.
Yeah,
and
they're
like
rippers.
you can't take it away from Silky. They know how to make a saw that works.
Yeah, that's it. Despite that, with my Gomboy, it's still working an absolute beast. It's just like a little sawn-off saw.
Absolutely.
Which is funny. And they work a treat and really, really good.
So I bought that one, that Silky pruning saw. I can't remember the model now. It wasn't a Gomboy. Just one of Silky's other ones. It also had a curve on it, a bit like yours, which made it really efficient for cutting. But the same thing happened. I was felling some trees, and just it got unfortunate. Like the mass of the tree just shifted slightly to the side, trapping the blade and cracked the top inch off the saw. And if the same thing had happened with a backhoe or a different folding saw that has a softer temper and doesn't hold an edge as long, doesn't cut as quick, but is more pliable,
actually bends.
It would bend.
Yeah.
And I've got
more
bent tips on all my backhoes, and you get people on the internet who say, "Oh, you're just using it wrong," or "It's user error," and that is like the case. But actually, you've got to think about these saws are built for use in the wilderness. Well, the backhoes are.
Yes.
The Silkies aren't. The Silkies are designed primarily for pruning and
for the arborist world.
For efficiency and things like that. So they're designed to cut quicker. Whereas what we do is actually we're really beating on our saws. Like we've cut hundreds of staves today. With our saws.
We're in our little independent shelters that we've both made with kind of A-frames, all out of birch and pine, and we've thatched it with kind of a really, really deep kind of foot and a half, even more maybe, of leaves, really nice and waterproof. And it's testament to both the blades, the amount of work they've done.
The Silky cut great, like it's so fast.
It's a ripper, absolutely shreds. And again, it's a really versatile tool. But it's a shame that blade snapped like that, because if you were reliant on that, you wouldn't want that to be the case, which is another really important point with tools. You want them to be reliable, and I'm not saying that it's not a reliable tool, it's just that flaw leads me down the path of thinking I need something that's a bit more flexible,
more robust.
So we discussed even the possibility of trying to put a Laplander blade on the Gomboy, so I'm going to experiment with that as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think I see people's point when they're like, oh, it's down to the user, you have to just be really careful how you use them. But actually, trees do shift their weight when they fall and things like that, and your blades do pinch. As careful as you can be to relieve the pressure on the blade as you cut, at times your blade will get pinched.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a really important point you make. Despite anyone's kind of best efforts, things are going to happen unexpectedly. And let's say if you're limbing up a tree that's already felled, even one of the branches is bound to be on the ground, and you can put a back cut in it and saw from the top with the hope that the pressure of that back cut's released, and it will still pinch. So every scenario is independently different. And it just does lead that question about reliability, and sometimes speed of a task getting done shouldn't always kind of outweigh the risk of that tool breaking and doing so.
Yeah, and
you want to be able to do it continuously, again and again and again.
That's exactly it. And I think where that argument of you just have to be careful with your saw, that's fine for the first day you're out.
Yeah.
But the more reliant you are on your tools, is you become more reliant on your tools the longer you're out.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
the more tired you are. And if you are doing a survival type scenario, we are simulating a survival scenario here. We've got a bow draw fire that we've lit the fire with. We've got natural shelters that we've built in a day, and we are doing this to train and to get better. But we are relying on our tools, and we're doing that whilst we are tired. We're physically tired. And when you are bushcrafting, you're not always going to be fully as accurate with your saw, or as careful with your saw as you will be in an arborist situation, or when you're pruning coppice hazel for a couple of hours, or So it just brings into that communication, maybe design things. And actually the Silky
Yes.
is brilliant for what it's designed for, and I love it, and I think it's a fantastic saw. As a carving saw, I would 100% recommend it. As an arborist saw, 100%, it cuts like a dream. For coppicing, again, it's great.
Actually works for like a dream again. And for bushcraft, if you've got the capacity to replace blades and you're not going to be out on longer trips, by all means, make your life easier and use it. But if you're thinking about having something on a longer trip or something in your kit that you just want reliability, then maybe it's worth just having a little play with other things. I've used a few different saws in the past. I've used ones by like Flora, there's one by that Robans, or I can't remember the exact name, but there's quite a few, just generic ones that you can pick up on Amazon for 15 quid, 20 quid down at the garden centre. I even had a bright yellow one, I can't remember the brand of it.
Yeah.
They've all worked really, really well, quite a similar type of mechanism where it's got the kind of folding locks on the handles and they fold into themselves. And they're a good tool to just get used to, actually, for the bushcraft
For sure.
world.
I've got so much use on my Baco Laplanders that they've all the paint's come off them, because I've got 3 of them. One I haven't used yet.
Nice.
And I've put it in my kit for teaching carving.
Awesome.
And the other 2 I've got serious hours behind.
Yeah.
And I switch them up. I put use on one, then I'll put it away and use the other one, just so the use isn't all just going on one blade. I switch between the 2, and then I use my Silky if I'm going to be doing more carving stuff, more precision, or I want a bit more of a faster cut.
Yes.
But if I'm out bushcrafting, I will normally be found with my Baco Laplander on my hip. It's cheap. Well, they're getting a bit harder to find at the moment due to the pandemic, so I've noticed the price has gone up above sort of 25 quid, whereas previously I got mine for I think £16.
Yeah, they were always kind of sub 20, weren't they?
Yeah, so now they've definitely gone up in price, I guess, either from steel supply or maybe even just popularity.
Yeah, or production costs and
Production costs, yeah. So I've noticed they've got a little bit more expensive, but they're certainly reasonably priced. And I would say definitely a good beginner's saw.
Yeah, and they're not too long either.
No.
They don't get in the way. That's one thing about the Silky Gomboy. It's quite a long, the one I have especially is quite a long blade. So
well, not anymore.
No, that's it. That might be part and parcel as to why it snapped as well, because you've got that extra little bit of length to play with.
That's it.
So, you can take on bigger things, so you get a little bit, like we said before, overconfident, and even when you are doing everything perfectly, it can just change in an instant.
So it's just something to be aware of, and I'm coming at this from a perspective of actually seeing multiple Silkies snap.
Yeah, well, I've seen Craig from East Anglian Bushcraft. I've seen the tip of his crack snap off the exact same as mine. Yeah, and he had the longer one.
Yep, and mine snapped a couple of years ago. But actually, I was on a course as an assistant, and one of the clients brought a saw like that, building shelters, same as we are today.
Yes.
And it snapped, and it actually shattered the whole blade, and it could have been quite dangerous.
Yes.
And yes, it probably was being used beyond its design capabilities. But it's just something to be aware of. We're not bashing the saw. We love the saw. We think it's great.
I think it's awesome.
It's just be aware if you use a Silky, watch the tip.
Yeah, watch the temper. Don't bend it. They're brittle in the sense of, I guess their tensile strength is, not as, they haven't got that flexibility of the Baco. And it's a point that Tom actually raised earlier that's really, really good and interesting. Is about the sharpness. Silkies really retain their edge incredibly well because of that little bit of a higher temperature when forging, and the Laplanders, you can soon feel the wear on them, can't you?
You can. They get less efficient.
Yeah, 100%. And it's you can buy replacement blades for the Laplander.
Yeah, they're not too expensive.
So. The same with the Silky, but it is something again to watch out for. That with the Laplander, the other side of this is if you're going for something that's not as quick and efficient as the silky, which also lasts a bit longer. The flip side is if it's going to be a bit more robust, it might not perform as well over a longer period of time.
Be more tiring to cut the same amount of wood with a backhoe than a silky. I think that's a fair point to make.
Yeah, well, they have a different tooth profile as well, don't they?
They do, yeah, they do. A much larger tooth on the silky.
Yeah, absolutely. And a much steeper angle I've noticed on the actual, on the teeth, the bevel of the tooth.
Yeah.
It's a lot steeper, so I think it just rips that tiny little bit more. They're quite a sharp tooth naturally.
Exactly, and so I think on this argument that I've seen so many people shouting at each other about their favourite saw, and I think use what you like.
Yeah, me too.
Don't worry about what other people say, but just be aware that they have different design properties that are both pros and cons, and it's up to you to make that pick. And then if you go for either one, if you go for the backhoe, be aware it might cut a bit slower.
Yeah.
Be aware that it might not hold an edge quite as long as the silky, but you know you've got something that is pretty reliable. And then with the silky, it will cut amazingly. Just be careful of not snapping it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they aren't the only two saws on the market.
No, there's loads.
And I think we mentioned the Agua, so I'll quickly cover that. The Boreal sort of range of saws, I got mine on Tamarack Outdoors, a really good shop for getting you bushcraft gear that is harder to get in the UK, so definitely worth checking that site out.
Yeah, and they actually got my multi-mat to me.
They got it to you in a day, didn't they?
In a day, yeah. I called them up and they were really kind to say they could get it to me before 1 p.m. the next day, and it actually came like about, I don't know, 10:30, 11. Yeah, absolutely amazing. I was in need because my other air mat had a slight puncture and I didn't really want to bring an air mat to this woodland, knowing that we were doing natural shelters. So yeah, great company. So that's where you got your saw.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
where I got the Boreal. You can get, and I bought the spare blade from Boreal from Tamarack just last week actually. So that's going to be my project for the next couple of Wednesday afternoons with my dad.
Nice.
Yeah, just sort of Wednesday evenings with my dad in the workshop. Last week we turned a bowl on my lathe that
really
he's
cool.
restored. He restored it from an old vintage lathe. And yeah,
You've been doing some cool stuff with that.
yes, absolutely. And I'll touch back on my dad and his restorations in a little while because it relates to the topic. But I will just touch quickly on my opinions on the Boreal. I've had it for probably 2 years now, and we used it at the Bushcraft show.
Yep.
I've used it on a couple of day trips. I've used it on a couple of courses, and I've used it extensively today. I've used it a lot.
Really impressive saws.
It holds an edge, like the teeth are still razor sharp.
Yeah.
It cuts super quick and it's tough.
Yeah, and lightweight.
I think Joe Robinet, he dropped a tree on his Boreal and it bent, but he was still able to use it, and he felled a tree and it fell on it. Massive shout out to Joe Robinet.
Absolutely. I was going to say that's where I first saw the Boreal saw.
It's where I saw the Boreal saw.
Yeah.
And I know that lots of people think that when a channel gets big that they don't need a shout out, but actually I love Joe Robinet's videos, I love his content, he's been a massive inspiration to me. And yeah, I think Boreal 21, I wouldn't have got it if I hadn't have seen it on his videos.
Yeah, really handy bit of care.
And the work he does with using these saws shows just how reliable they are, because he puts them through the paces.
Yeah, definitely.
He even uses them for de-limbing. He like smacks them into the limb, like into the little offshoot branches and takes them off.
It sneds with them, doesn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, super good saw. It packs up really easy. I'll just grab it because it's within reach. You'll be able to hear this. It's got a really nice lock up. If I just undo the clasp, that's it coming apart. Just stab Liam with it.
That's all right.
And if you listen to this click, it's so easy to put together.
Awesome.
You can just hear like how well put together that is, and the tension that it puts on that bow saw blade. So a really good, lightweight, modern folding buck saw.
Yeah. It's funny because Stanley actually do a smaller kind of version.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, that I was looking at, but it doesn't look as well built, so it's probably definitely worth investing in one of these ones. Maybe the Stanley would get you through a few nights or a camp or two, but this is just so well built.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, just hitting that in its kind of U section really good quality steel, and it's got a lovely green handle.
You can get it in orange as well if you're prone to losing things.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
We're not sponsored by any of these companies. We just like their gear.
We're just talking out of experience, really.
That's it.
If we were using other stuff, we'd be talking about that also.
So you can get this saw in a 15-inch. So I've bought the 15-inch blade. I'm going to be making a buck saw. So stay tuned on my Instagram. No doubt in a couple of weeks I'll have a finished 15-inch buck saw with an Agua Canyon all-purpose blade, so it's actually got rake teeth for using on green wood.
Yeah.
They're basically little separate
really nice
teeth
pattern, actually.
and they're designed for pulling out the green wood fibres.
That's it.
And clearing that cut.
It's really nice, actually. Buck saws always have had a special place in my heart because there's a similar tool in traditional brickwork that we use, which is called a bow saw, and it's basically, if you imagine a buck saw, but instead of a saw blade on the bottom, it has two twists of wire,
right?
Really fine wire twisted together, almost like a string, like as if you were making cordage.
And what do you cut with that?
And you cut soft rubbing bricks with that,
right? Okay.
to make ornate brickwork. So yeah, I've always been surrounded by really similar things and have used them loads, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so bow saws, buck saws, they're kind of my thing. They're, my dream workshop is to have them everywhere.
I love that. Well, Agua Canyon also have just released or not just released, but they have released a 24-inch. So an even longer saw. So
nice.
This is compact and this is the perfect size for what I need. But if you were going to go and do like winter camping, hot tenting in Canada or something, you might want the slightly longer one just to
for sure.
increase your efficiency. But for the UK, what I'm doing,
these things are perfect.
This is perfect. Bow saws, buck saws and all that jazz. While we're on it, both me and Liam have one of my dad's first prototype buck saws.
Yeah, I was going to say, because this is a kind of a buck saw that doesn't have the upper limbs and a tensioning system like a traditional one, which is one that Tom's dad really kindly made. It kind of turned up in the post as a surprise. And it had my kind of custom logo on it, and yeah, just really nice. Kind of, we've got a matching set, haven't we?
We have, yeah. And I mean, the blades in those are just cheap B&Q blades, but we could easily replace them with an Agua Canyon blade or a different buck saw blade, like a Baco blade. But the saws work great, and my dad did a great job on making them. So actually, as a project idea, if you're bored at home and you've got a workshop and you want a little project, buy yourself a bow saw blade.
Yeah, make a buck saw.
Make yourself a nice buck saw to take out in the woods.
Yeah.
So I'll keep you guys updated on my progress with my 15-inch.
Yeah, because the one your dad made is to give you listeners kind of a visual interpretation of it. It's kind of like a stretched out H.
Yes.
Wooden frame, the blades in the bottom, you've got the central bar which is removable, but anyway, so you've got this H with the metal blade on the bottom, and along the top it's got some really nice twisted kind of jute rope.
Yep.
And you put a spindle of wood in there and you twist the rope, and then that tensions up the bow and kind of pulls the arms together, I'll cut that there. Which tensions up the bottom arms and the blade, so you can just get it to the perfect tension, and it works amazingly. I actually put the blade on back to front the first time, or on the outside, because your dad had engineered it so well with his little pins.
Yeah.
That I didn't realise you could push those out and then slip the blade inside. So I had it on one side and it still cut a dream, which is testament.
They're good. They're really good, and they're a really fun project to make. And Dad's promised to show me his techniques for making those, which would be really cool to learn from him, because he's really into his woodcraft and not bushcraft necessarily. He comes with me on my trips, but he's more about his woodworking, his restorations and things like that.
Yeah.
And that brings me on to another point. Actually, vintage saws.
Yes.
Now, me and my dad have got a whole load of vintage saws that we use all the time.
Yeah, he was showing me a few of his collection at the bushcraft show, actually. And
that's it.
We were looking around the antique shops, but with him, weren't we?
Yes.
Kind of the antique stores, tool stores, to kind of see if we could pick any up.
You can get some really, really good saws, and my dad's found them all at a dump shop. So lots of times, places where people go and throw away their junk basically.
Yep.
They often have like a lady or a man there who sells things that people have thrown away and they've salvaged because they've noticed that it's a good quality saw or something like that. And he's got some distance, a really good traditional make of saws that someone was just going to throw away.
That's amazing.
It was all rusty. It was horrible. The handle was all falling off, so he's repinned the handle.
Love that.
He sanded it all down, restained it all, re-oiled it with linseed oil, and he's got rid of all the rust off the blade and put like a black sort of vinegar patina on the blade.
Yeah, like a gun black almost.
Absolutely, like a gun black
Yeah.
and a gun bluing, and it just looks awesome. But he's then got a teeth set, and he's set the teeth.
I know. Oh, when he was telling me this, I was just like blown away.
Yeah, he's learned how to set all the teeth and all the different ratios. I don't really understand it, so I'm not going to pretend I do.
No, well, it's kind of that instrument that allows you to push the blade, each tooth of the blade, a different direction.
Yes,
the
to
same
make the
amount.
curve.
Yeah, exactly. The same distance either side of each other.
Yeah, exactly, and that makes the width of the bit, like of the cut.
Exactly.
That you're making. And so he's reset all these saws, and then he's meticulously sharpened them all with a saw sharpening file. And he's made so many now. We've got not hundreds. We've probably got 30 saws that he's restored. Everything from little carpenter's saws, coping saws, to a full-on two-man lumberjack.
Like, yeah.
Literally old school.
I know what you, like planking saw.
Planking saw. You
Down
use
in a pit,
two
almost.
people over a saw pit, and he's actually restored me a one-man crosscut saw like that, which I was using at the weekend to cut up a whole load of green ash. For
That's
my
amazing.
carving, I get through a lot of greenwood, don't I, Liam?
Yes. Oh, tons of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's good though because you know, the recycling aspect of what your dad's doing is really cool, and the recycling aspect of what you do is really cool.
And we use them together.
Yeah, it's this really cool combination and kind of harmony with what you do, and I love it.
No, it's great.
I love that you do stuff with your dad.
Yeah, well, me and my mum were actually out hiking, and we saw that the tree surgeons were cutting down this ash tree and an oak tree, and we made a mental note of where they were, and we went back there the next day and filled the car up. They'd chipped most of it, but they'd left a couple of really large pieces, so we filled the car up with it. It was just dumped in a ditch, so we were like, right, we'll have that, I'll use that for my carving. My family are such good sports. My mum's like, oh yeah, just chuck it on the back seat, it's fine. I then got back and I used my dad's restored crosscut, a one-man crosscut saw. Amazing bit of kit. Basically,
Beast.
a man-powered chainsaw. Basically,
Yeah.
it like cuts.
These really kind of curved teeth almost on it.
It cuts so viciously, man. A lot of hard work. Like my arms were aching the next day after cutting up that log.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But a huge saw and a beauty. It's actually, I posted a picture on Campfire Carvings on my Instagram
Yeah,
of that
beast.
saw, along with my American felling axe, which I was using to split up some of the timber. So if you're interested in actually seeing the job me and my dad did on that saw, go and have a look at my picture I posted on Campfire Carvings and see what you think. But yeah, he's also done me a couple of smaller crosscuts for my carving box with smaller teeth that are much more accurate. So yeah, I'm getting a whole lot of new saws that I'm going to be trying out, but they're actually all vintage. They're all sort of antique saws. And one he found, I'm just going to mention this, sorry, I realise that I'm probably just going on about vintage saws like a nerd.
I love it. I'm really interested.
But he found this one that I'd never seen before, and I don't know the name of it, I know nothing about it, so if anyone listening knows more than us, it wouldn't be hard, but if anyone listening does know more than us
Help us out.
about this, please let me know a bit about it. I'd love to know. But basically, it's a small saw, it has a wooden handle, and then it's double-edged.
Okay.
So it's got a fine tooth for like real delicate work on one side. Think smaller teeth than even a backhoe.
Right, and then you flip it.
And then you flip it and it's got like bucksaw teeth on the other end.
Oh, wow.
But it tapers to this really narrow thing. I'll bring it on one of our camps because I reckon it'd be a useful saw.
No, I can envision it though.
And
I can envision what you mean. That's amazing.
It's really cool. So it's like a two-sided saw. So it's got two different types of saw in one.
Yeah.
pretty cool, and I've not seen anyone use it in the bushcraft space, so maybe stay tuned and we'll get it in one of my videos and with Liam in future.
That'd be awesome.
We made a sheath for it, me and my dad, so it's actually got like an oak sheath that we made for the saw.
Yeah, I love your kind of wooden sheath designs. They're really, really cool.
Done a couple for axes as well, haven't we?
Yeah, and that's a good kind of point to make. Actually, axes are, there's nothing wrong with using an axe, nothing wrong with using a saw, nothing wrong with using a machete, as long as you're doing it safe. There can also be a little bit of snobbery about, oh, you're just using an axe, you should be using an axe, or
yes.
Why are you using a saw, or why are you using an axe?
There can be many times where actually a saw is safer to use than an axe. Now, I'm the biggest axe nerd in the world.
Oh, you love them.
If I could use an axe for the rest of my life, I would. Well,
you've got an axe with you, haven't you?
I have. I brought my small forest axe, and for me, that's the tool that I will do a lot of work with.
Yeah.
But there's times where I want to leave a clean cut. If I'm coppicing hazel, I want to leave a sloped cut off that stall, a nice neat cut, so the water will run off and it will allow it to grow back.
Yes.
I don't want to leave like a chipped at, hacked at thing.
Yeah,
I'm overemphasizing this, obviously, because I would do it as neatly as I could. But there's times where a saw just makes sense. Cutting up firewood in the dark, for example, with head torches. I don't want to be swinging an axe at night with a head torch. Whereas I could very safely, Liam puts his head torch on me, we put maybe our lantern on, and we have a nice bit of light. I could easily saw up some firewood if I needed to, even though it's dark. Whereas I wouldn't use my axe past sundown.
No, axes can, they have a time and a place, and especially when the alcohol comes out and stuff like that, it can get quite easy to have a glancing blow, and that's all you need. And a saw can just be that little bit more easier to control. So I think everything has a time and a place. And for me, I've got a what you could basically call a machete with me. It's a gill pin from the Brushing Cutlass Co. over in America. I won that in a giveaway on Instagram, really unexpected actually. Tom tagged me in a post, and then just one day just got this message saying, what logo do you want on your gill pin blade? So definitely go check him out. He makes some really cool bits of kit, but that could be really considered quite over the top. But I found it really handy for snedding, really handy for cutting up a few bits of hazel and sharpening the end of one of my Y sticks for my shelter. And it's stuff like that again a saw would struggle to do, making a sharp point on the end. That would be tough with it.
I used my axe for doing that, and your gill pin and my axe made light work of it. And I think we'll save the big knife discussion for a separate episode.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
There's some people I'd like to approach actually about that topic and see if we can get a cool guest on for it. But I've got a lot of opinions about a big knife, and I think in the UK it can be quite unpopular to carry a big knife because we have quite a bad knife crime problem, I guess, in the UK, I would say. Yeah,
there's a real bad culture with people who just don't respect them as a tool. They're not designed to be used the way they unfortunately are, and I think that's part of what we're trying to portray on this podcast, is about education of the right way to use tools.
Exactly, like to me it's not a weapon, it's a tool. For enabling us to safely be outside. But I think they see me out with a big survival knife that looks a bit military, a bit tactical, and the immediate assumption is, I'm either compensating for something or I've got the wrong intentions. But actually, they're really useful tools, and I don't want to get into this now because actually...
No, 100%. We could digress for hours.
Talk for hours, because I love knives, whether they're small or big. Yeah. And I've got a load of experience with big knives. I talk to Alex Wander and Gray Mustino from Wander Tactical all the time.
Great guys.
Really good guys. I have probably 4 or 5 Wander Tacticals. Everything from a big sort of survival machete, like their version of an SE Junglist, but with their own like design, that's doing them a disservice saying that the SC Junglist is great, but it's a separate tool from what I'm talking about. I shouldn't have compared the two.
No, I know what you mean though.
But it's that sort of size.
Exactly. Yeah,
just
exactly.
for people that might be familiar 100%. With the Junglist.
It's always hard to reference something, isn't it?
Yeah, they're both amazing tools in their own right, but I don't have a Junglist. I have the Wander Tactical sort of in that size range. And I could, if I was using a one-tool option, I would probably go for an axe.
Yeah.
But actually, I'd be just as comfortable with a large knife.
Well, that's kind of what I've done today. I've gone for the large knife, you've gone for the axe, and probably next time we do a shelter, we'll probably switch that up.
Yeah.
But it's definitely one to have in your bag for tasks when the saw doesn't come into its own. Which, you know, saws aren't always going to be the be-all and end-all in bushcraft, but they are an extremely handy asset to have in your backpack, and well worth thinking about it. Because, you know, bow saws or traditional buck saws a little bit heavier. You've got a few more things to go wrong. The string could break, the wood could split, multiple things could happen. With your boreal saw, it's pretty much fail safe unless the blade itself snaps, and the packaging or the way you carry that in, you could easily have some spare blades in there.
That's it. I've got a Frost River saw bag which works really well for the Boreal 21 for anyone looking for a bag for their saw.
Love that. It's really nice wax canvas, isn't it?
Yeah, it works
really
great.
Nice.
Really nice.
And it's I think there's just go out and get yourself a little starter one if you haven't got one.
I'd start with the Laplander or something like that, and then see where you want to progress.
Yeah, because the Silky, you can get kind of drawn into the I want to get one. They're expensive, really, really good, cut really fast, but they do have their downsides. And even in experienced hands, they can, number one, bite you, and number two, snap.
That's true.
So yeah, one to watch out for.
So Liam, what was your first bushcraft saw?
It was, I can't remember the brand, so you'll have to forgive me on that, but it was just a folding saw that I picked up at my local Wyvale garden centre, and it had a little green handle and a metal clip. It didn't hold closed when it just had a loose hinge, so it didn't hold closed. Closed it didn't hold at all, so it was just swinging open. So if you had it in your bag,
little flick saw.
Yeah, that's it. If you had it in your bag and you didn't realise and you put your hand in there, you could quite easily open your hand up. So definitely always put your saw away pointing down in your bags, guys. But yeah, just had a little metal fastener so it would lock when it was open, and I could use it just like a Laplander, about the same kind of size. Had a tiny, slightly bigger teeth, but quite sharp, similar to the kind of Silky design. And it was actually a really good saw. I had to get like an old shoelace that I had, and I fashioned a kind of fastening system on the end through the eyelet, and I drilled a hole through the blade so that then I could feed it through and tie it.
It's good design.
And yeah, even though I drilled the hole, the blade didn't, the tip of that didn't snap.
That's good.
I'm fairly certain in my loft that saw will be up there.
Probably.
Because I still have all my original bushcraft kit from when I was a really, really young kid.
So how old were you when you got that? Can you remember?
Christ.
How into your bushcraft sort of journey were you? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's all right. Probably like 11, 12.
Yeah?
Yeah, probably
pretty soon into
it. I think it was one of the first things I got. I got a Mora and a saw, and then after probably a year or so, I got an axe. Then I got a Grand Force small forest axe, and that was my first one. I unfortunately don't have that axe anymore. That's lost, hanging on a tree somewhere. I'm sure of it still, or some lucky bushcrafter's got it.
Yeah, someone's pride and joy now.
Which I'm grateful for.
You replaced it, didn't you?
I'd rather it get used. But no, I've replaced it and I've got another one now. But yeah, probably one of the first things I got. I can distinctly remember it, and it had a yellow and brown kind of hiking shoelace on it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And what about you?
So, interestingly, like I got into uni when I was at bushcraft. I got into bushcraft when I was at uni, so I didn't get into it as young as you. I was always outdoorsy. I used to go hiking with my parents all the time. I loved being outside, and I really had a sort of passion for it. But I didn't know it was called bushcraft until university.
Yeah.
And I got into it through the shooting world, watching videos on YouTube and then discovering bushcraft YouTube channels.
Nice.
And it was only after that I then found like the Ray Mears DVDs, after I'd already been in this sort of YouTube space for a while, watching other people
course.
like MCQ, Joe Robinett,
the kind of OGs.
Mike Barton as well. Really like bushcraft Bartons.
Any tarot?
Tarot, yeah.
He's great.
I used to watch them all.
Yeah,
I still do. But yeah, so I got into bushcraft a bit later than you, but it was while I was at uni, and the thing that really drew me to bushcraft was the sort of traditional side of things.
Yeah.
So I got myself an Mora,
nice,
and a TBS knife, and they were my sort of first two. I also had a Boker, a sort of 20 quid. It was 20 quid. That was my first knife. That was my first knife, thinking about it. It was like a hunting knife.
Nice.
And I used that for probably a year, and then I upgraded to the Mora and the TBS. I used the Mora for carving and the TBS for sort of a bit more sort of bushcrafty stuff. And then I sort of discovered Essie and got an Izula and stuff as a neck knife to go with it. But I didn't have a saw for the first probably 2 years of my bushcraft interest.
Yes.
And it was actually, I used to do everything with an axe.
Nice.
Because I got an axe pretty early on in my bushcraft, because I was watching a lot of...
opposite of me.
Yeah, I was watching a load of Joe Robinett. I really enjoyed watching him use an axe, and it sort of made me think, I really want to learn how to do this safely.
Yes.
So early on I took an axe course. I spent hours in the garden practicing how to use an axe safely, and became really competent with it. And for a while I had this whole sort of thing where I was trying to prove to everyone, I don't need no saw.
Yeah.
And in the end I was like, no, to be honest, a saw is just as useful in its own right. So I actually then did get a saw, but I didn't get what people would expect to be my first saw.
No.
Because at the same time I just graduated at uni. I got a gift from my parents of a little bit of money to sort of say well done, and I put that towards an order at Bedfordshire and
nice
in America, and to me they were like the holy grail of knife makers. Back in my sort of getting into bushcraft, wanted one for the whole time I was at uni. Couldn't justify it until I graduated, so I got a Bedfordshire knife, and while I was ordering that, I saw they did buck saws, a 20-inch buck saw. So I got this lovely wooden buck saw by Bedfordshire. Still got it, use it all the time at home. Beautiful. I don't take it out in the woods as often because I've got the Agua Canyon now. Yeah. It's slightly more less special.
Yeah, and a bit more weatherproof
that makes sense.
as well.
That's it. It's like the Bedfordshire is lovely, but it's got a bit of sort of sentimental value to me now.
Yeah, it's your first saw.
That's it. And so I don't like to abuse it, whereas the Agua Canyon I smack around, bless it. So for a practical saw, I now choose the more of a beta saw.
Yeah, the Boreal.
But I still have that in pride of place as one of my top favourite saws and tools.
That's amazing. So when did you progress on to kind of like the Laplander? Was that shortly after?
Before going on my first course with Paul.
Nice.
So my first, I booked onto the elementary bushcraft course quite a few years into my bushcraft career, and yeah, it was the recommended saw on the kit list, and I didn't want to take a buck saw. I thought it would look a bit keen. Everyone's rocking up with their little folding saw. There's me, 20-inch buck saw.
Not the best for coppice.
No, so that's when I got my Laplander, my first one, in preparation for that course, and really enjoyed it, and have had one ever since.
Nice. Yeah, because for quite a while actually, Laplanders were quite hard to get hold of. I remember when I was young. Really the only place to get them was through the Woodlaw shop,
right?
I think I remember correctly that stock was always like a little bit of a hard thing to get hold of. I don't know whether they were originally European, more Swedish, Scandinavian.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Their company started getting more stockists over here, because they're definitely far more available, or were pre-COVID. But it's something I need to now have a look at, getting one of those blades and see if I can fashion it into the Gomboy, and then I can interchange it, and I can, like you, when I'm doing work at home, if I'm doing a little carving project or cutting some finer work, I can put on the silky blade, and when I'm going out on trips and I know I'm going to be putting it right through the paces like this, and we're cutting hundreds and hundreds of logs, then we're going to be swapping it over to the Laplander. But yeah, really interesting stuff. Saws have, who knew saws could have so much to say about them?
There's so much to say about them, and actually
we've only scratched the surface.
We have, and I like just saying about backhoe there has just reminded me. Actually, when I do the work on courses, we have 2 course saws, and we go for backhoe bow saws.
Okay, yeah.
So they're like metal frame. They have a clip
frame, yeah.
and a big old blade, and they're really efficient and they work great. And you don't have to worry about them. They're tough, and so that's another option. They're really good. You could strap that to the outside of the pack, have a little plastic cover for the blade.
That's it.
That's another option I hadn't even thought of until now.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, actually, to maybe as a little tip to kind of leave it on, I've discovered as blade protectors for saws, the kind of little plastic filing sheaths. So, you know, the ones that you can get like a wad of 10 or 20 pages, and you get a little plastic thing and you push it over the end, and it holds it together in like a makeshift book.
Right, yeah, got you.
And it's just like a plastic spine on the end. Those on blades or saw blades
work well.
Beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's a good tip. My dad's made some with a router or some machine that he's got in his workshop, where he basically gets a thin bit of wood and he cuts a kerf just wide enough for the blade to go in.
They're
so
gorgeous.
You can make your own in the workshop. I'm not sure exactly how he does it. Maybe at some point we'll get my dad on an episode and he can explain his wizardry.
I'd really enjoy that.
But yeah, at some point in the future, probably not for a while, but at some point we'll definitely see if he wants to come and have a chat to us.
That'd be awesome. So yeah, definitely tell us if you guys started conventionally with a Laplander or dive straight into the world of silkies, bow saws, like Tom got an adventure swan, or yeah, what did you start with? Did you go out like my good friend Josh, who was on episode 4 of the Wodesman? He sometimes even goes out with like just a normal wood saw, you know, like an Irwin wood saw.
He had one last time.
Yeah.
They work great.
Yeah, it's perfect. Does the job. A saw's a saw in that sense. Sometimes with the teeth pattern, let's say if it was a finishing saw, you're going to have a hell of a time cutting up some hornbeam.
Yeah. Well, I think there's so much more we could say. We could go into like tips and tricks for safe use and things like that. But I think let's save that. We can talk about that in the future. There's lots of things that you can do to maximise your efficiency and your safety.
Yeah, I think one thing is just as a general bit of advice is don't have your saw, if it's a folding one, facing with the opening upwards in your bag, so if it does come open you're not putting your hand down in there.
Yeah.
Another one, keep your hand away from it when you're starting the initial cut so it doesn't jump up.
Absolutely. It's especially with a bow saw, they can really jump, so just be aware where your hand is. You can do a trick where you actually put your arm through the bow saw. Mm-hmm. So that stops the blade jumping up.
Yeah, you're actually grabbing the log through the bow saw.
Yeah. Maybe watch some videos on that. It's hard to explain that like over audio only. But yeah, there's a tip where you can put your arm through to grab the log, so the blade can't jump up because your arm will stop it.
Yeah.
Also, you can put, once the blade has disappeared into the log, you can put your thumb on the cut on top, so that the blade can't jump out because your thumb's over the top of it. That does work quite well.
Yeah. And be careful with silkies. Just on that lateral kind of sideways movement. Try not to have too much pinching, and also, they're really good and sharp, but we're not knocking them at all. Rate them really highly. It's just kind of a word of caution for bushcrafters out there, because we don't want to see you bitten like us.
That's it. I mean, my backhoe is really bent. I've actually bent it back a couple of times because I use them without really. I use them to get a job done. I'm not super precious about them. I just use them to get the job done. And if you have that mindset, there are going to be times when your saw does bend.
Yes.
Even if you try not to. Just be safe. Keep your hands well away. Don't cut into your legs or anything.
Please no.
Cut away from your body. Same with any sharp tool. just be aware of where that blade's going to go once the cut has been made.
Yeah, and the thing is with a saw, it's kind of more, it's not a clean cut, there can be real tears, so
Yes.
hard to fix.
That's it. And also it can cut, if say you have a piece of oak and the bottom is really punky and rotten, and you start sawing through the top and you're really giving it some welly, and the wood is like rock, it's like not going anywhere. As soon as you hit that punk, your blade's going to chew through that in a second.
Yeah.
And if your hand's on the other side of that log, you're going to be in a serious world of hurt. So just always keep your hands well away from the blade.
Yeah.
Be sensible, basically.
And have a first aid kit when you are using one.
Yep, we both have plasters on today, and my first aid kit came in handy, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we were discussing what first aid kit to bring. I said to Tom that mine was a little bit lacking on a few things. I need to top it up, so he brought his, which was well stocked and came in a right treat, and it will be there for the rest of the trip. So thank you, mate.
No, absolutely. And I think that probably is a great introductory episode into the world of saws. There's so much we could talk about. We could get someone who's a real expert on saws. We're just hobbyists. We use our saws a lot.
Yeah.
Like I use a saw almost every day when I'm carving. Liam uses his saws all the time.
Yeah, even in brickwork we use masonry saws, which is like saws with tungsten tips, but I won't get into that. But yeah, like you said, they're versatile tools, and not an essential part of a bushcraft kit, but a really bloody handy one. Hey.
Yeah, and for people we did bow drill today. For people who are carving the notch, often the hardest thing. Some people prefer to use a saw to cut that notch in.
Yep.
Now I personally prefer a knife because it gives me more control.
But they can really aid in that notch cutting. I know, especially for beginners who are working on that, even just getting the notch at first, understanding a bow drill set.
That's it. So they definitely have a really important place in your kit. I personally think that no tool should be on its own. In my opinion, it should be a trio at least of tools. You should have a knife, a saw and an axe, or some form of splitting utensil.
Yes.
So it could be a froe, it could be a knife with a thick spine, like my knife is a 5mm spine that I'm wearing at the moment.
Yep,
that's brilliant.
mine.
I could batten with that. It's perfectly fine. Your gill pin is a tank, and you could batten like a log, like huge log with that.
Absolutely, that's chewed through a few big hornbeam logs and just with ease.
Yeah. So I personally think it's all in a balance between different tools. Like,
yeah, have them there to help your journey. And you don't want to be hindered by just taking one.
no, it can be done.
Yeah, it can.
But it's easier if you have a fleet of the right tools.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we have just started a little beer.
Yep. What is it? It's a New England Pale Ale.
It is. So it's called Wilderness by Abbeydale Brewery. Really nice little beer, this. Nice light one. We haven't brought many beers because we're doing a bit of a sort of a real deal with this trip. We're carrying everything that we carry.
That's it.
In on our backs. Like the food
we
is
to just
is
take
proper.
it seriously, didn't we?
Absolutely. So we've only carried in like
2 beers.
2 beers a night.
Yeah.
And it added a bit of weight to our packs, but actually, as a little treat for working hard today, it's a nice thing to look forward to in the evening.
Yeah, it's really done the job, because that is a good job. Really tasty.
It certainly is. We need to have like a little intro to our beer discussion on each episode.
Yeah, if anyone's got any ideas for little jingles or anything, send it in.
It's beer time.
It's beer time.
Right,
Awesome.
well, we hope you guys have a wonderful week and enjoy the outdoors as much as you possibly can in that time.
Yeah.
And we will see you on our next episode.
And definitely send us what your first saw was.
Absolutely.